our council meeting for the, we always have the echo in the morning, don't we? Welcome, councilors, to our council meeting for the 30th of March, 2023. We'll start with a Karakia. Neville, can I ask you to take us through that?
Absolutely. Tēnā koe, e te tia mana koutou ko ngā kai kaunihero o te rohe o Waikato, tēnā koutou katoa, no reira ki i noi tātou. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kine ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. I hi ake ana tāta kura, e tio, e hoka, pauhu, i he mauri ora. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you for that, Neville. All right, we'll move to apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Graff. Just want to extend this council's condolences at the recent loss of his father. So our thoughts are with Councillor Graff at this time. We also have apologies for lateness from Councillor Mahuta. Any other apologies to note? No? All right, can I have a mover for that? Councillor Nicol, seconder Councillor Cookson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. Confirmation of the agenda. While the agenda was very thick, there was quite a few pages. I think we'll make a pretty good time through it. Do I have a mover for the confirmation of the agenda that starts on page 2? Mover and Councillor Downard, second and Councillor Nicol. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Any disclosures of interest, additional disclosures that haven't been noted previously or in relation to any of the items on the agenda? Nope. All right, we'll move on to our confirmation of minutes section. So the first minutes are, this is section 5.1 on page 7 of your agenda pack. This was the minutes of the 9th of February council meeting. Do I have a mover that we are confirming these? So do I have a mover that these are Councillor Marr, Councillor Hodge? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. On to 5.2. This is page 13, the open minutes for our council meeting of the 23rd of February, 23. Confirming those minutes. Mover in Councillor Hughes, second in Councillor Strange. Happy to second those. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, we now move on to the committees reporting to council. The first one on page 24 of the agenda pack. This is the CERT committee, CE Employment and Remuneration Committee. I'm happy to move those as true and correct. Do I have a second? Councillor Clarkson, you happy to second? Or Councillor Hughes? Yes? Yes. I understand your point. Okay.
This is a long-held convention. The reason that this occurs is the minutes of the subcommittees. We only confirm the minutes where it's our members. So all of the members on CERC are members of the council. We have no externals. And the reason this has been done in the past is simply for the time between meetings. The confirmation occurs quite quickly. If we go back to CERC, we'd be waiting a number of months for those to be confirmed. But obviously it's a convention that can be looked at if the council wishes to do so.
With the greatest respect, I think it's totally inappropriate for me to sit here and because I won't sit here and approve something that I wasn't there at. And I'm not a member of this committee. Therefore, I should not be confirming those minutes as true and correct. It's against standard convention in the big wide world. So
I understand. Councillor Hughes? would you like to-
As the chair of this committee, I can confirm that it's been circulated to me and I've given approval for it.
Oh,
It's
This
true and
is,
correct
this is CERC, not.
Oh, sorry. I was at that
finance,
meeting
but-
as well and I'm, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Councillor Kneebone?
Look, I'm of the same view, but reality is if we wait for some of these committees to approve their own minutes, we're going to hold the whole permanent process up. And as long as Dave and your team are circulating the draft minutes to the chairs of the committees and those chairs are circling around their members and saying, hey, you guys are all happy that these are hunky-dory, then I think we've just got to keep rolling. But certainly and I think those that were present at those meetings need to be the movers and seconders.
Yeah, exactly.
I get where you're going, Noel, and I would been down this track as well, but this becomes impractical to hold the whole process up.
So are the majority happy that we continue with the current? I'm looking for nods of heads.
Yeah,
that-
I'm
that-
happy.
Yes.
My view is the same as Stu's. Clyde and I got our minutes as draft. We went through them. If we thought there was a problem, we just went out to the rest of the committee.
Yeah,
Then we sent it back.
yeah.
And it's true, but when we come to this, if somebody from that committee could do the moving and passing, personally, I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, that was the point I wanted to make. I think as long as the people who move in second and actually the people who were party to the meeting vote and the rest should just stay out of it, really.
All right. Okay. So I think we've got general consensus that we'll continue with the current convention. So I've got, do I have a mover of that? I do. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. Board that Councillor Smith has abstained. All right, we'll move on to item 6.2. This is page 27 of your agenda pack. This is the Finance and Services Committee. Councillor Hughes, would you like to? Oh, so we've got section A and section B, so them all together? All right. Happy to move and we've got a seconder in Councillor Strange. Just noting the section B item, which is put forward for approval by council. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, we'll now move to the minutes of the Climate Action Committee. This is page 37 of your agenda pack. Councillor Nicol?
Yeah, happy to move. Was circulated around the committee and I was happy with it.
Great. And a second in Councillor Downard. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, we're now on page 43, item 6.4. This is the Strategy and Policy Committee. Again, we have a series of section A's and one section B. Councillor Marr? Moved by Councillor Marr, seconded by Councillor Hughes. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. Now 6.5, this is page 52, the Environmental Performance Committee.
I'll move it.
Katarina moving. Do we have a second? Councillor Clarkson? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, we now move into section 7, which is the committee's reporting to council. So just refreshing, remember, because you just talked about that committees that include externals, we're just receiving these, right? We're not confirming them.
That's correct. We only have been confirming the minutes where the committee is solely membership of council members that are in the room at the moment or not. The committees that we receive are the minutes are committees where we have external members such as the external chairs, our iwi partners, joint committees such as Regional Transport and Future Proof. Today we've put forward a resolution to receive all of those minutes and note the section A decisions that they made under authority. Any Section B items for council to consider, we will do after this as a separate item, just for the ease of distinguishing between the
Right.
two.
Great. So we've got a sort of a cumulative motion there for receiving the minutes from Tūwharetoa Māori Trust Board and Waikato Regional Council Co-Governance Committee, the Future Proof Implementation Committee, the Regional Transport Committee, and the Risk and Assurance Committee, and that the Section A decisions are noted. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? And Councillor Downard? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just, for correctness, I just thought I'd let people know I emailed one of the democracy advisors, which talked about when I entered the meeting, and we just removed it because I was online at the start of the meeting anyway. Just so you guys know.
And I have checked with
Yeah.
Democracy and they have changed that.
Thank you.
Great. All right. All those in favor? Did I do that yet? Yes? Opposed? Carried. Right, now we go. So this is 7.2, isn't it? Am I on 7.2, page 70? Which is the Section B item for future proof. This is the tours for the future proof sorry. What am I doing here? Including so the tours for the committee, including the tours for the regional transport. It's okay. Mark, do I need you to speak to this, or is everybody happy with where we're at on this? All right. Okay.
Sorry,
Right.
Madam
Yes.
Chairman, was the tours changed for Oliver?
Yes, you
he
can.
was. Oh, yeah.
Right. So you can see in the blue that one person nominated by and representative of CCS Disability Action in an advisory non-voting capacity is appointed to the Regional Transport Committee. So we've noted that there. All right. So do you want to move that, or Councillor Strange? I'll go ahead and second that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. Are we on to Section 8? Great. So we're now Section 8.1, which is the Health and Safety Report. We're on page 132 of your agenda. You'll note that Fabulous Democracy Dave has put agenda page, whatever, at the top of every page of our pack. So we don't get confused when reports have different pages. So we're on 132, and we welcome Stuart Brown to the table. Welcome, Stu.
Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me, yeah? Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Anything you'd like to draw our attention to in specific?
Yeah, the first thing up just was to clarify, I've talked a couple of times just about the PCBU training, and we're going to tack that on to.
I get you to bring that mic just
Yep.
a little bit closer.
Yep, there you go. We talked about the PCBU training that was coming up for council, and that is going to be scheduled in the next 6 to 8 weeks, and we'll have engaged the EMA and a lawyer to come from there to provide that to you guys. So that will be coming up. I guess in regards to the report, I'll take that as read. The first section there really around the Fulton Hogan issue with the lorry driver, and they were fined in regards to that. That is one of our critical risk areas in the organisation, dealing with contractors, and we'll take it really seriously. And we have actually developed an in-house e-learning module for all of the key staff across WRC to actually take part in, so they know the obligations that are required when engaging with contractors. So we feel that we're doing a good job in that space, and we understand our obligations. So that's in regard to the contractor safety. Moving on through, you'll see the incidents this time around. There were a couple more. We seem to be having a number of vehicle incidents over the last few months that aren't our fault internally, which is good, but I guess it's concerning out there on the roads. It's a bit like wacky races. Um, You'll see that we've had another overtake on a blind corner. So less than ideal, and that's been followed up. That was actually with an external company, and we engaged with them directly on that, and they've dealt with it. The other thing just to note was the waiting in water. There was a instance there where someone was out in floodwater and put in a report that they got Campylobacter, but we didn't attribute that to work. That was something that was picked up from family. I'm not sure whether they had a dodgy Indian or what, but that came from that. So it was just to bring that to your attention. And we've followed up to let them know that if anything like that happens in the future, we'll require them to attend the doctor so we can actually confirm where that was from. And moving on again, I mentioned last time that we were having a bit of a drive this year, more than before, on the staff influenza vaccination. So that's underway, and I guess we have now confirmed that Natasha Jones will be available if any of you guys would like to take that offer up. She'll be able to provide you with a voucher on that. So that was really it from the health and safety report. I'm not sure if you have any questions on that.
Councillor Strange?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Stu, for your report. I note in February that we had a threat of an incident at the transport centre.
Yeah.
Is this reflected in this report?
It's not, no. That's that was something we just dealt with as an executive, I guess. So we haven't. That wasn't a direct threat to us. That was a in the community kind of thing. That was the rumble, I guess, that was we had at the last council meeting when we were dealing with that. So that wasn't directly targeted at WRC. That was just in the vicinity. And I guess we managed that with the transport centre and our building owner here, and that was. Thankfully, nothing came of it, but was a pretty significant disruption for a day or two.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that it's reported and that staff's well-being, psychological harm is reported as well.
Yep.
I know that they possibly did have to relocate here because City Safe vacated the transport centre as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're just keen for there to be a bit more robust report going in
Yep.
around that one.
That's okay. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good morning. And then this is a question outside the square in theory. Over the last couple of days, I've seen a whole lot of letters of complaint that is quite degrading, and especially, to the council itself. But of course, there are staff involved in the writing up of some of these reports. Does that get reported anywhere in health and safety? Because I would think mentally, some of those complaint letters are not good.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, just a
So
question.
yeah, no, it doesn't, and I guess we do get those on an ongoing basis. Unfortunately, it's par for the course when you operate in this kind of organisation. One of the risks that you'll see in the report is that psychological harm, and that hasn't been identified as a critical risk. But we actually currently have that under review at the minute to see if that's going to change. So we are taking that quite seriously and looking at that for the future. Yeah.
Councillor Smith?
Just to speak to Councillor Strange's point, I think it should be recorded as a near miss at least. So it is in there because obviously there was stress and otherwise for those staff, and if they were relocated, some positive action was taken by the organisations. And whilst not directly involving this, there were staff. So I think a near miss would be suffice to capture it.
Yeah, so I have no issue with that. I guess to explain that situation, unfortunately, the communication was really poor between Hamilton City Council, the police, and ourselves, and also GoBus. So Mark has done quite a bit of work on that to ensure that that's improved going forward. The move to actually relocate people from the building wasn't one of safety. It was just a general feeling. The police were completely confident that they had the situation under control and advised that we had no need to remove our staff. Hamilton City Council decided that they would, and unfortunately didn't talk to us about that. So whenever we found that out, we thought, from a caring perspective, certainly bring the staff over to the main building and, ensure that they feel comfortable with that. But there was no actual requirement to do that.
I appreciate that, if I may, Madam Chair, but there was a cause and effect.
Yep.
And even though it wasn't deemed necessary by the police,
yep,
the organisation took a positive action.
Yes.
So therefore, in my view, it should be at the minimum a near miss because that action whilst probably not necessary, police, it did prevent some harm or potential harm or psychological harm. So it's a non-event,
Yeah.
but at least it's recorded.
Yep, no, totally happy to accept that and put that in the report and update it for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, is this conversation recorded so that we've got some, as PCBU, the governors, is the detail of this conversation recorded?
Yep.
Thank you.
Live streamed and recorded as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, oh, yes.
Yeah,
Councillor
just
Strange?
following on from Councillor Smith's request, could the minutes actually reflect that the question was asked and answered, please? Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Stu? If not, can I have a mover to receive the health and safety report for February 23? Councillor Downard, seconding Councillor Smith. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome, Mr. CE.
Apologies for lateness.
No worries. Oh, should we have noted that in the minutes? And the apologies, or apologies, just council members? Just a question. Okay. We'll share that out. All right. So we now move on to item 8.2. This is on page 137 of your agenda pack. This is the adoption of the Waikato Regional Council 2023 to 2025 strategic direction. We've got Karen Bennett to take us through this paper. Did you want to start? Or
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind yourselves, this is obviously a very important document because it helps to set the direction of this council and particularly will help inform the LTP process going forward. Staff across the organisation have worked really hard, taken on board your comments previously and gone out quite widely to stakeholders to get feedback, which Karen will report on. Thanks.
over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Chair, and Altamaria councillors. Thanks very much for all your time and energy into the review and update of the Waikato Regional Council strategic direction. We have reviewed the 10-year strategy and updated it to reflect this council's priorities for this term. It will be 2023 to 2025, covering those calendar years. So we have been out to our iwi partners, to stakeholders, to the public, and to subject matter experts on staff. And as we've gone through this process, we have updated and incorporated the feedback, and you'll see this in your final document that's in your agenda pack here today for adoption. Some of the key changes that you'll notice are in response to iwi partners who've requested that we focus more closely on te mana o te wai, te mana o te awa, in the context, the reasons why we are focusing on water as a priority. We also had feedback from iwi partners that they wanted to see some slight tweaks to that design element we have, the po, that is going to become an integral part of our brand story, the front of your document there. We have had considerable feedback from stakeholders that they wanted to see us emphasize our engagement processes, that they wanted to see us emphasize the evidence base and to communicate our science in more accessible ways. So we're talking to people rather than scientists was the feedback. And so that has become a new priority in your, or a new goal in your priority for community connections. So working through the priorities, we have carried forward from the previous strategic direction, water, biodiversity and biosecurity, and coastal and marine. Looking at the waves of change and the drivers of change, you have asked us to evolve, and this has been supported by iwi partners and stakeholders, the priorities relating to infrastructure. So that has become sustainable development and infrastructure. This allows us to focus on the need to increase our resiliency, to look forward to the Spatial Planning Act that's coming in, and to look at sustainability across our whole region at a spatial scale. We've also evolved transport connections to community connections, and this is to acknowledge the need for us to look at social cohesion, recognizing that we have to enable people to participate fully in their society, to be able to access transport services that get them to health, to education, to social life. We've also we've had some communication with the Disabled Persons Assembly, looking at how do we increase accessibility of services. And then you'll see from the very first iteration of this strategic direction, there are 2 new goals in that community connections priority. And they relate to working with our councils, our local councils, the city and the districts, to get really close to our communities. This is feedback we heard from yourselves and also from our councils, but also from iwi partners and stakeholders. We all have to work as local government to connect with communities. And the other goal related to this science, make science accessible, make information more readily available to all people so everyone can understand the direction our communities can go in together. And then finally, we moved a broad priority of climate to more specifically about the transition to a low emissions economy. And this allowed us to focus more keenly on the areas where we can make a difference and to work with the sectors to actually transition to a new way of doing business. In that, we also picked up feedback from all our stakeholders. So I present now to you for adoption your strategic direction for 23 to 25. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Karen. I know we've spent quite a lot of time, both as a council and as staff to pull this together. I appreciate the way we utilized social media and our website to invite comment back from the wider community. I think that was really positive, and also have appreciated the multiple conversations we've had, both yourself, Chris, and myself, directly with iwi, but also through our JMA agreement, or sorry, our JMA committees, and through staff. Getting that input from iwi and buy-in from iwi has been really helpful in developing something that I think leads us well into our long-term planning process. Are there any comments or questions or points of clarification? We all good? Nice. I've got a mover in Councillor Nicol, second in Councillor Strange, that we receive the report and adopt the direction. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Well done.
Just
Done.
one topic.
Yes, sorry.
When are we able to distribute it?
Thank you for asking. We have all the material ready to go for this afternoon, now that we've got your adoption. Thank you.
Nice.
If I may, Madam Chair, Karen, just before you leave, so there is the main document that's been produced. There'll be a summary document as well, which councillors will be able to use to.
May I clarify? Yes, thank you. So we have a policy now for these big documents are digital first, so we don't print a whole lot. So we have a printed summary document for you to use. We've also prepared a PowerPoint that you can take anywhere you wish if you want to talk to your stakeholders and your constituents. And there's also a new web presentation for you to send people to a new link. So, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. All right, we are now on to item 8.3. This is page 161. the revised standing orders. Now, we did have a couple, did we have a couple of workshops? I think we did have a couple of workshops on that. Just one workshop? On this. So we have been through this. Did you I'll go straight to Neville if you would like to introduce the item.
Kia ora no koutou. This is correct, Chair. There was a workshop held with councillors on the 21st of November, and a full explanation and understanding of the process, particularly in relationship to the use of the LGNZ template. As the report outlines, this requires 75% of members to vote in favour of the changes that have been made. The changes are outlined in the analysis section of the report under section 15, what those incorporate. Should the council choose not to adopt these proposed standing orders, then the current ones that are in place will stand. I really don't have much more to add. The report's very substantive and provides all of the information I think that's relevant, but I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Smith.
Madam Chair, can we put page 213 up on the board, please? 213. Who's controlling that? So page 213, 20.11, electronic devices at meetings. The reality is I know what this is trying to achieve, but I've just noted 3 members looking at their own phones, doing whatever they need to do. So this makes a mockery of this particular statement. So I believe that the first line should be removed. Electronic devices can only be used to advance the business of the meeting. The reality is, for the last 6 months, that's nonsense. We've all looked at our phones, we've all left the meeting. So to be pedantic like that and to be pulled up for something that we commonly do with the respect to our colleagues, I think should be removed, that first line. And I have no problem with personal use may only occur at the discretion of the chair. Well, that's implied until it's taken away under current, common practice. So I know I'm being pedantic, but the reality is if you're putting standing orders in place, which everyone ignores, then there is no point in having standing orders. So can we just make this a little bit more realistic? So personal use may occur with respect to the meeting or something like that.
So you're suggesting removing that first sentence?
Absolutely, remove the first one and modify the second. I haven't actually concocted a replacement, but I think personal use may occur so as not to disrupt the meeting. And then the chair may require that the device is switched off. I think that's fair. But that then reflects what is actually happening in practice. To me, these things have got to be meaningful, and if we ignore them, what's the point? So I'm just being pedantic and tricky, but the reality is that's what these things can be used against you. And let's not set ourselves up to fail.
Right. So we're suggesting removing that first sentence, having the second sentence read, personal use may only occur so as not to disrupt the meeting. And then removing at the discretion of the chair, and the chair may require electronic device, that an electronic device is switched off. So that the rest of it stands. All right. Would have been helpful to have gotten these suggestions ahead of now, so we're not drafting in the meeting, but that's all right. Yeah. Yeah. Some of us were on a fabulous bus tour with the integrated catchment management crew yesterday. Councillor Dennard, did you want to make a comment?
I'd just like to note that Councillor Smith has been pedantic. I mean, you could go through this, and I appreciate that you're an expert in standing orders, Councillor Smith, but, going through this whole document, I mean, it's like a Bible, you can interpret it in different ways. I mean, I interpret it, that first line as if I've got extra information on my phone that is pertinent to this meeting, that it might be either an email from a contingent or something like that, I haven't seen out of this 5 months that I've been in council, anyone rude with a phone ringing and going off out of especially full council meetings. That might happen in a workshop where, everyone appreciate everyone's got business, but yeah, I think that's been protected. Yeah.
But I suppose I'm happy to support that change. I think that it does allow a recognition that we all do tend to glance at our devices as we go through the day. The number of days and hours we spend in this chamber, it almost becomes part of how you get through this job, is being able to ensure that other parts of your life are ticking on as well. So we've got the change. Have we got that noted? Any other, Councillor Nicol?
Yeah, there was one, 13.11. I just wanted to ask a question about what that meant. I have to flip to it myself. Because it said it. I just didn't understand it. Where a member is at a place that makes their physical presence at a meeting impractical or possible. So you mean, so say if they're not here, then you can be online, is kind of what that's saying. Is that correct? Dave was nodding, so
Yeah.
I think I got my answer. It just
Yeah.
seemed like a very roundabout saying of when they're at home, they're obviously be online or such things. Okay, thanks, just to clarify that. And the other point I wanted to make was just mindful that, these are outstanding orders and they deviate, at times from how other councils do things, and I want to really work for this council. 9.8 and 9.10 talk about the public inspection of agenda or distribution of agenda of at least 2 working days. That's the local government requirement. I personally have always wanted it to be a little bit longer to allow us more time to read it. This week was a prime example of where we had 2 really full days for a lot of councillors, where I wonder where, other than if you're going to give up your weekend, where are you going to read it? So if the council had any interest in it, we can make that 3 days and we can ask our staff, what implications does that make for you? But my understanding is there's quite a rush with that staff go through to get these ready on time, but that same rush can happen 1 day earlier or 1 day later. It just depends on what. So I could invite Chris to just make a comment in case that helps new councillors, just putting it out on the table.
Yes, I'm not too sure what the 2 days comes from, if that's an LGNZ. I'm looking at Marley for a suggestion. I think that our practice is to try and get agendas out. We like to have it with you for 5 days in advance, if that's possible. Sometimes it's not always possible, but that is Marley, that's our practice.
I've noted your.
Kia ora tātou. Yes, just confirming, Chris, your understanding of what our current practice is. We do aim to get agendas distributed 5 working days in advance. The 2 working days is a legislative minimum timeframe that is set out in Lagoima. And so that's why it's been carried over to the LGNZ template. And so the other point is, Councillor Nicol, you're quite right. We can amend our own set of standing orders to set a minimum that might be greater than what is in legislation. In terms of implications, we could probably meet that expectation of 3 working days, given that we aim for 5, but it might mean that there could potentially be
addendums or
addendums. That's right, increase in addendums, because from time to time there are individual topics that require a little bit more time to, I guess, finalise before it's circulated within the agenda.
I'm not too precious about it. Just thought I'd put it out there for council.
Right, Councillor Smith, did you have an additional?
No, I just wanted to clarify that what I had talked about under 20.11 was, I didn't see the full change up on the board, but is that to be inserted later?
We'll note it in the motion. We'll note the change. Any changes we'll note in the motion.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes?
I'd just like to endorse the current policy. I think it's, there's obviously an honest and sustained effort by staff to get these out as soon as possible, and that's certainly appreciated. And I don't think we should be too prescriptive in putting pressure on, because I'd much rather have the full agenda and all the information once rather than coming in bits and pieces. So as far as I'm concerned, 2 days is fine if that's what it is, but acknowledging the efforts of staff to get it out on a timely basis.
And just on that point, Madam Chair, if I may, the further we push it back, the further the staff have got to go, and then the timeliness and the issue may be superseded. So, yeah.
All right. Oh, yes, Councillor Niebauer?
Just noting and acknowledge your points, Chris. I used to find particularly when chairing ICM, if there was a particular big agenda item, often it was ready weeks before the agenda, but there was all the other rats and mice that had to come into the agenda. And I'd often say to Greg, hey, can we just flick that one out a few weeks earlier just so everyone can get their head around it? And particularly as a chair as well. And I'm sure staff are happy to keep that process going. It makes life a lot easier, but doesn't constrain us to the other issues here.
Great, great. Yeah.
Last comment would be, because while we had a session on this in November, it was more of a getting taught what the standing orders are currently rather than a workshopping of it. If we'd had more of a workshopping of it, I would have thought that we'd go more in depth on whether some of our workshops are open to the public or whether some of our briefing section of that is made available to the public so they get the benefit of a whole lot of really great presentations that we get. But at this point in time, I know that what we've got is working, so happy to carry on like that. But at some point, if there's a desire out there to look at that again, I think we should bring it up.
Great, thanks. All right. Okay, can we bring up a motion? So we've got that the report is received, that council adopts the revised standing orders, and noting the changes to section. So this is where we're making the change you brought forward, Councillor Smith. So noting the changes to section 20.11 so that it now reads, the first sentence is personal use I think we have to say personal use of electronic devices just for correct grammar. Personal use of electronic devices at meetings may only occur so as not to disrupt the meeting, full stop. And then continuing on with a chair may require that an electronic device is switched off if, etc. All right. Do we have a mover in that? Councillor Smith, and a second, Councillor Clarkson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Fantastic. All right. We'll now move on to section 8.4. This is on page 247. While Greg is settling into the chair there, can I just extend our thanks again to yourself, Greg, and the team of Integrated Catchment, along with the other fabulous staff, Mark Tamura and Mike Scarsbrook, who and the extended team that joined us yesterday for that fantastic tour of essentially the parts of the Waikato district and into the Waihau Piako, helping us to get to grips with all the complexity and all the challenges that in particular your team has faced in the face of some pretty turbulent weather patterns over the summer, but also just in terms of what your work does, you and your team's work does to protect our communities. and to enable our productive capacity of land. So thank you for all that you and your team put into putting that together for us. It was much
you, Madam
enjoyed
Chair.
and the weather was beautiful, so.
Well planned, and we even planned some resting birds to be sitting there as well. So, but look, the team really appreciate getting out on site and showing you what they do.
Great, great, good stuff. All right, so on with our agenda items. So this is the Muggeridges Pump Station. So we put pause on this last month so that we could go back and have some additional conversations with the landowners that were going to be directly affected by this this decision and gather a bit more information. So Greg, is there anything you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So just to recap for councillors, so there have been a couple of reports prepared for council mid-February and end of February. So I won't recap the information in there. This is the supplementary report to that. And at the last meeting, council did endorse several things in principle, including using the surplus, current prior year surplus to offset the general rate contribution of 15% for the state, and also looking to set aside the canal costs for now on the anticipation that there may be a future option that may involve that canal and that may need further consideration by council. So subsequent to this, council did request that we meet with two groups, one being the former members of the Flood Protection Advisory Subcommittee for Hauraki, and the other being the direct beneficiary landowners. Both of those meetings were held in mid-March, and just and do appreciate and acknowledge the attendance from councillors Cookson, Smith, and Dunbar-Smith as well to help us to have those conversations. It's fair to say that obviously no one is happy to be in this situation. But what you'll see in my report is there was an acknowledgement that from a point of view of the options put forward, options 1, 2, or 3, that option 1 was the one that was certainly favoured, as opposed to putting more pressure on the direct beneficiary landowners who still need to obviously work through some options for their drainage challenges that haven't gone away. But I'll leave it there. I mean, it's a really reasonably self-explanatory report, and certainly provide the opportunity for other councillors to talk who are directly involved in those conversations. But just noting that our staff recommendation has remained as option 1, noting those other principles to offset those costs.
Great. All right, I'm going to go to Councillor Cookson first as the chair of ICM, then I'm going to go to Councillor Smith as the deputy chair, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Dunbar-Smith. So as you were the 3 that were involved in those meetings, I'd like you to have the opportunity to share your views.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, at both those 2 meetings, both meetings, option 1 was chosen because it was the easiest rat to swallow. I suppose is how the community would have said it.
That probably is exactly how they would have said it.
They also asked that we come back and sort of see if we could get more contribution from the general rate. That's up to this group here to decide. They think they're unfairly treated in their situation of Muggeridges has been a situation of that catchment for 30 years, which they don't believe they've, council and Hauraki haven't met the level of service in that catchment. So they've been disadvantaged over that time of drainage and service to the floodgate and the pump, which in that situation, there is a document that talks about that's come up. That's it's only to staff, and Hauraki wouldn't release that document because it's a document of staff only. So
we have to report from Hauraki District Council.
Hauraki and Regional Council, that's staff only. So they weren't prepared to release that without us agreeing to it as well. So that document has to be left where it is until I think next time we discuss what happens with the canal. If there is a level of service that's not been met, that deduction could come out of the cost of the canal when it lies at that time. It's sort of the speak that
the other discussions I've had with the landowners in the last 2 weeks that they would like that if there is a level of service that's not been met, that cost could come out of those targeted catchment, Muggeridge catchment in the future, if there is a situation where we haven't met their level of service. And I think that was said on the night as well, Greg. Yeah, it's not a good place to be. We had to take it on the nose that night. And we had to say that these things weren't going to occur again to the best of our ability. We weren't going to let these scenarios happen again because the community can't afford it. And as you all went out on that bus trip yesterday, you know that the Piaka River scheme is the poorest scheme in the system. And these debts can't afford to be laid on it because it has got the oldest pumping stations, and all those ones are all in the future, all the ones that have got to be upgraded. So there's a huge cost in the future coming to this catchment. And they can't afford to have debt that can't be, that they aren't getting a service level from. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and just acknowledge that, so it is a complex system, definitely. And part of the project to date has been to look at that level of service and what's been required. One of the big challenges with Muggeridges is to actually get the water from the drainage areas to our outlets. Just for the benefit of councillors, the Hauraki District Council looks after the drainage network, and we look after the outlets through to the Piaka River. So it is a complex system, and there's definitely challenges there. And certainly I've got staff undertaking to investigate any other concerns that we raised during those meetings. So.
But in that, it's the level of service is also not it's that catchment has never ever had the floodgate or the pumping to service the area correctly, as that's one discussion that's been brought up. So that needs to be investigated in the future, that it's not just they've never actually had the right capacity to the catchment. As one discussion that's got, and I think we must investigate that and prove that right or wrong, because that's a part of the level of service issue that they've got on that Muggeridge catchment. So where that goes, I don't know which side, who's right or wrong, but I think it needs to be calculated out and see if there is any merit behind that. Thank you.
Right. All right. I'm sure you've got that noted on your to-do list.
Absolutely.
Are you good, Robbie? All right. I've got a
Just
Councillor
supporting
Smith.
Thank you. Just supporting the comments from Robbie. In the Pyro meeting, which was the scheme, we had one landowner who wasn't part of that. Sorry, he might have been one of the reps, but the majority of were not landowners. And they came to the conclusion of option one much more quickly and probably accepting the situation. So when we attended the Ngātia meeting, it was a very hostile crowd. And there was a good selection of probably 15, 20 people, landowners. And I think and they were quite vocal towards staff. And I think to the credit of the three of us, we directed that to us really, and probably easier for us because we're all newly elected to the council, and we kept bringing them back to the issue and how we were going to address it rather than the peripheral issues. But one of the issues that Robbie's already touched on is that they did ask for consideration of a higher than the 15% or 14.25 because of the background issues to this, and we said that we would bring that back and absolutely ask council to consider it rather than just wipe it under the table and say, yep, heard you, but no. The other issue, level of service, and just to help Robbie there, there is an absolute concern that where council had set levels of service around this area, that throughout the period of the last 25, 30 years, that council has never matched the level of service that it had put in place. And so this is a big exercise if one is to go back and look at the level of service at each change, because it's not the level of service now, it's how it's progressed over time. And then I made that to them. I said, this is not about now, it's about the history. And if you want that, big exercise. So, yeah, I'm not sure whether we want to request staff to do that or whether we bite the bullet and sort of encapsulate that into the final figures that we land on. And I've talked about the 15%. Needless to say, come the end of the meeting, I was very happy where we got to, in that the landowners in particular, I think they felt that they had been listened to and they had actually been heard. And they came up to all three of us and even the staff and thanked us for coming and listening to their concerns. And I think that's about the true representation model. We represent them, respect their views, and articulate their concerns around this table. So, yeah, the debate on some of these questions is to come, but I think it was a very beneficial process. Thank you.
And I certainly heard from a number of people how much it was appreciated that the three of you turned up and that staff were there as well. There was certainly, while the subject matter was challenging, there was acknowledgement of the willingness of the three of you as counselors, as well as the staff members to show up and allow them to be heard. So, so I certainly have heard that myself as well. Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yeah, just picking up Noel's point there. In February, we arrived at this, and it was pretty clear that this was something the previous council had decided and left to us to administer. And it was difficult because it seems so unfair that you pay for something that you haven't got. And that was certainly the genesis of the meeting. I think it was very good to go back and communicate with them and talk with them. They still feel they're paying for something they didn't get. And they would like the general ratepayers to pay for the whole thing, and they're not happy with the government pulling out at that time. It was a lesson in going and speaking with people, and of the options that they had available, they still preferred the one where the general Piako ratepayers paid for a greater portion than themselves. And so I think we got somewhere in what is an invidious situation. So I think we've done the best we can. And at the end of the meeting, there seemed to be agreement from them that this was, in the worst of all situations, the best option that they could come up with. So, yeah.
Councillor Clarkson.
Yes, just following on from the comments of Councillor Cookson, could somebody enlighten us about the existence of this staff-only report? Because it does seem to me that it's germane to the decision, particularly in relation to the proportion of general rate and the use of the surplus, in the sense that if there is some, it's almost like there's some liability being proposed here that has not currently been addressed. So I'm just concerned with that, to hear of a staff-only report, that it sounds to me is germane to the decision that we're going to be making, that if it exists, and whether or not, why would it not be able to be shared with councillors?
So, through you, Madam Chair, I'm not aware of that specific report, so I'd have to follow that up. The only comment I can provide around level of service is the general advice that I've been provided is the primary problem is around moving water through the catchment to the outlets as opposed to the outlets. But I think we will need to follow up on that particular report and provide council with some information on that.
So I guess I'm not really clear now about what's in this report specifically and how it specifically relates to this particular decision, because you're right. If this is a report that somehow sheds some additional information that we needed to consider in making this decision, then then that's an issue.
Well, it could
But
imply some
but
liability.
I don't, I'm not clear, Counselor Cookson, on what you think is in this report and
But,
where it's.
but what I understand, it's a document that explains that the level of service hasn't been met. So it's about that we either, we haven't got the water has not got to the floodgate or the pump and the floodgate aren't big enough for the catchment. That's what the document is about. So our level of service over the last 30 years in that scenario hasn't been met because we've had a catchment of 2,000 hectares or say, and it should have only been that catchment with the floodgate and the pump should only been 1,500 hectares. So we've never met what they're saying is that the level of service has never been met because the catchment is bigger than what it was designed to take. That's by what I understand is what the document says. So we've never been able to meet the level of service.
And so how that connects with this decision that is before us is that,
So, I mean, through you, Madam Chair, I mean, the two issues could be separated because obviously we have been
okay,
collecting
but I want to
rates,
make sure, if they can be separated, I want to
yeah.
make sure we're clear how they are separate.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess this is, I guess, suggesting that what we've been rating for over the past few decades has not met that expectation. As I'm not aware of the details in the report. I do have our Waihapiaka Zone Manager Jody Kosian online as well, and she wasn't aware of any specifics. But I guess all I can provide is our commitment to follow that up as a separate matter to this particular challenge. I guess the challenge does remain with the debt, but they could be easily two separate issues that we could deal with as council.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're happy. Sorry, I'll come back to you, Robbie, but just Bruce want to make
I
sure.
can turn mine off, Madam Chair, as long as you come back.
Oh, yep, I'll come back to.
Yeah, well, I'd just like some, I guess, people who've been more deeply involved in this to explain whether in fact the issues can be separated, because I'm sort of, the way I heard it is there could be potential implication both in relation to how we partition the cost here and future liability. So I'm just, just need to know about this stuff.
I agree.
If I could just make a comment that I guess the whole reason for why Muggeridges was wanted was there's a concern that something wasn't working well enough in an existing scheme. So I'm trying to work out what's behind, it wouldn't be happening if there was a current, if people were very happy with the level of service, as to whether there's a liability that council needs to be aware of if they make a decision. That's the question I think on the table, Greg, and we probably need to be able to have you be reasonably definitive about that. With respect to the comments about the general rate contribution, I just might be helpful if I just say, I have asked staff that, is there other precedents and why is it that this is recommended? Now, my understanding is when the scheme was initially devised, these things were thought up the front of how it would be funded. And so otherwise it probably wouldn't have had a decision to go ahead at the time if that hadn't been sorted out. So, and I understand this is still within the bounds of the original decision to go ahead, and I'm looking for you to clarify if that's the case or not, Greg. And I note that there is a 15% general contribution from all ratepayers in the region, as well as the recommendation to be spread across the scheme. But Greg, can you be more definitive? Are we aware of any liabilities that could be made in making a decision along the lines of the staff recommendation?
So I can be definitive at this point in time. I'm not aware of any liability in terms of level of service for our assets. But as I said, I can undertake to follow that up to ensure that is the case. I mean, the Muggeridges project did come about because the catchment has changed over the decades, particularly due to peat settlement, and is expected to continue the change and expand because of the settlement that's happening within the catchment and within the drainage network. So I think that is the primary issue that Muggeridges was attempting to address. It wasn't only a pump station, it was also additional drains to bring the water from the catchment to the pump. So that is, I guess, all I can offer at this stage, Madam Chair. And as I said, the advice that I've heard that I've received is that it is primarily about the drainage network bringing water to our outlets as opposed to our outlets. But I will make a commitment to ensure that that is the case. And in terms of the funding, question was asked around the funding policy. So there was a funding policy adopted as part of this project, which is outlined in the report. And what we're looking at today is, I guess, an adjustment to that to use the Piaka River scheme rate as an acknowledgement that an asset hasn't been created, and therefore this is the fairest outcome that we believe is staff for the community.
All right, just in terms of speaking order, I've got Councillor Kneebone, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Smith, Councillor Cookson, Councillor Clarkson. Happy with that? Councillor Kneebone.
Look, I think the document that Rob is referring to needs to be looked into, but I don't think it should be part of the decision we've got to make today. Otherwise, we're going to be here for a really, really long time. And I suspect that whether it's a document or concerns that could probably apply to other parts of the catchment as well. So that's just my thought. Still happy with staff recommendation.
Great, thank you. Stu,
Sorry,
Councillor.
Madam Chair,
oh,
can I
yes.
just quickly, so Jody, who's online, has also just reaffirmed that her understanding is that there is no issue around our level of service. But as I said, if there's more information that comes to light, we will investigate that appropriately.
Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thought Chris explained the situation quite well, which was in part answer to my question. To me, I see them as two separate issues. Somebody many years ago approved a system which was probably, in hindsight, inadequate, but it would have been accepted by all, and the costs at that time would have been identified, and that's what's been charged in the rates. We now have a totally different situation, which is what we're looking at in here. I don't think we should be trying to confuse the two. I think we have to be quite clear. We have got a proposal from the staff. We should approve it and get on with it. And if the system needs to be upgraded, that's a separate issue which should be addressed in the future, not tried to be litigated here today.
All right, are we adding new information?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
But I sense there's a consensus in the room on that point, so I won't talk to that. There is one issue that I have omitted to address, and it was a commitment that I gave to those present at the landowners meeting. It was that they requested, in fact, I pondered a question to myself, which was taken up, and this is on item 3 in the staff recommendation of the 458,000. The recommendation at the moment is to park that and let it incur interest. I did say that I would bring the request from those landowners to look at funding that 458 out of the surplus and parking it rather than incurring interest for a period whenever it is determined, because the issue was not going to go away. But if the 458 was taken care of and parked, if a scheme is to be picked up later, that 458 could be transferred as a debt to that scheme. And there is a wish from those landowners that something is actually achieved. And I think from Robbie's talking with the Mayor of Hauraki, that is also the desire of the Hauraki Council. And so I said that I would put that on the table and as a request that the 458 is covered by the surplus as well and parked as a reserve to be shown as a debt to that scheme if it's picked up in the future. If it's not occurring interest, but it would have to be dealt with by council at some stage. So that's another thing on the table. I'm sorry, but I omitted to bring it forward earlier. Thank you.
So I'm looking between you and Greg and Janine sitting over there. Waiting for somebody to meet my eyes. Who's going to speak?
Thank you. I think you must have been reading my mind. So just for clarification, the suggestion is that a prior year surplus be used to cover the $450,000 with a promise that it might get revisited in the future if the scheme went ahead. Yeah. And so that would mean that interest payments on that component wouldn't be incurred in the interim. Yeah, so I'd probably have to look to Janine if she has any comment about that. I'm asking probably in respect of our own council's funding policies with respect to how these can be used.
Thanks, Chris, through you, Madam Chair. Probably the key point around that is that our prior year's surplus funds are all general rate funds. So it is out of step with the funding policy in this matter to do that. So that would be the key consideration that needs to be made. I think, as Councillor Smith has noted, the conversation around the canal is a very live topic with Karakia District Council. So the avenue might be trying to actually resolve that as quickly as possible so we know what the way forward is, rather than sort of putting in the interim measure.
And look, I fully respect that, Madam Chair. The commitment was made to bring it forward. And of course, council can, by resolution, override certain policies. And so if it was minded, or if we were minded to use that 450 to park that at the moment, I believe we can, whether there's an appetite, but I'm fulfilling the commitment that I made to those ratepayers. Thank you.
Respect that. I suppose I'd be really hesitant to make a decision that was contrary to a policy without a fully informed report as to what that decision might result in. So that's, yeah.
Greg was present on the night, so I did say it's known that I would be raising this on behalf of the constituents. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Clarkson.
Yes, so I think I've had explained to me to a pretty good extent, you know, the issues that I've raised, but I guess, and perhaps I've come to the view that the mystery report was a device in a negotiation. No, I mean, why was the report raised? It was being used in the context of this decision-making process. But I would still eventually like to see that report, because it comes back to a principle of democracy. You know, if people point to a report and say it's a staff-only report, you know, I would have thought that it's something that we should be able to see. So, and just to reply to the comment by Stu, I was still intending to make the decision today. I'm just trying to make sure that we're properly informed in our decision making. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I would still like to see the staff only report.
Sure. And we've had the commitment from the director that these are separate issues, and that you'll be looking into this report and ensuring that it comes back either through the well, yeah, that's where it would come through ICM committee, so that councillors are confident that that they're across that information. All right. I've got Jennifer, and then I've got Mikhail.
Thank you. It's a question for Greg, and that is your staff report talks about the opinion on behalf of staff is that the option 1 is the fairest option. Sorry, just give you the chance. Your staff is saying option 1 is the fairest option. I'm thinking that a constituent in Hamilton or Thames or wherever that is further away from this project looking at this report would ask, okay, so in front of the councillors is an option of a 5% contribution from general rate or a 15% contribution. What would you give as the reasons for why you landed on the recommendation that you made around that specifically? The fairness and the work of the project that would justify the general rate going to 15.
Sure. So the initial funding policy for Muggeridges, that's also detailed in the report, did acknowledge the potential benefit from the asset to particularly the direct beneficiaries as well as the wider Hauraki Plains. The reason for recommending the use of the Piaka River scheme is that it does reflect that prior agreed funding policy that council has already worked through quite a substantial process during previous years in terms of looking at the benefits of the scheme to direct ratepayers as well as the broader community and the region. Given the nature of work that's undertaken, we believe that's the most appropriate, because there is still value there for the Piaka River scheme, and yeah, potentially in terms of a way forward with other options. So yeah, that's the reason I would be putting forward.
But at the time when it was first, not first, but eventually landed on that funding policy, the contribution from the general rate was assessed as being fair at 5%. Why is it now fair at 15%?
The primary difference is that no capital asset was prepared. So the funding policy previously was around the establishment of an asset and the creation of benefit to that direct area. And so I guess the realignment of funding proportions to reflect that benefit. Whereas what we have now is effectively incurring repayment of debt for, I guess it's work that has been undertaken, but without the direct benefit being provided to that area. So the fallback position is that Piaka River scheme rate.
I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
Can I just check also, Greg, that 15% general rate contribution isn't inconsistent with other scheme works and enrichment schemes?
Each of our schemes does vary. I don't have those percentages to my mind, but they do. Like, for example, Project Watershed is a lot more complex in terms of contributors, direct beneficiaries, general rate contribution, etc. But in all of our schemes, there is a general rate contribution in that sort of order of magnitude to recognise the broader benefit provided by our schemes.
Councillor Downard.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Nebo. We've been through this. It's not something nice. I don't want to see a policy change unless, as you say, Madam Chairman, that we have a workshop on the ramifications of that. We've been over this with a couple of workshops, and I'd just like to do a notice of to move the recommended from the staff, the motion. Thank you.
Right, so we've got a mover and Councillor Downard. Councillor Nebo, did you want to second that? All right. Go to you, Councillor Cookson.
I agree it's got to be dealt with today, and we can't park it any longer. It's just, as I said earlier, as long as everyone's aware that I think in the future, when we get this information, if the level of service hasn't been dealt with, we deal with that at that time and either take it off the canal cost or we just, or rate relief, one or the other. We got to resolve that at the time. It doesn't stop today dealing with what it has to deal with because we can't afford those interest payments to keep collecting on the Piaka River scheme and at a cost to the scheme that it can't afford. One thing I'd like to say though is what some of you here might understand is why I call the Piaka River scheme the poor cousin too. If this had happened on the Waihau, these ratepayers here would be paying for that on the Waihau, but because the Waihau scheme, the Piako pays towards the Waihau, but the Waihau doesn't pay towards the Piako. And because I know on my farm, I pay for all schemes, yet I'm miles away from the Waihau. So in some ways we get double hit on the, none of the Waihau schemes paying towards as a general rate, as a targeted rate into this, only the Piako. So that's where they feel really pinched and hurt, is if this had occurred on the Waihau, they would actually be paying towards it as targeted rate payers from the Piako. But it doesn't work the other way around. And that's just a understanding why they feel that they're being unfairly treated. Because so sorry to complicate it, but I just wanted to make you understand of what my constituents feel, that if this had happened the other way around, we would have been paying the other way as well. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge, and then I would like to wrap this up.
I'm okay for 1 to 5. I'm not sure about 6, Greg, because this gives Hauraki District Council almost an option. Is if you don't want to pay, it's okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm not happy with that. I think we should emphasize somewhere that they should be paying. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's everything I'm happy with, 1 to 5. But I'm not keen on 6, sorry, unless there's a clause. Yeah, I'm just not happy with 6, so I'll probably go against 6.
Can I just clarify, is there an option to remove 6, or what has led to 6 being in there?
Could I comment as a mover?
Oh.
Seconder?
Instead of, okay, I'll go to you, Stu, and then if you want to,
I don't see any harm in taking it out, because if that scenario evolves, we'll have to go there. And if can't find any other way of dealing with it, then we'll have to deal with it. But so I don't see that taking it out is going to.
so you're happy to take it out? I'm just looking at the, sorry. The mover, are you happy to take that out? Because that's a fair point, that if they refuse,
It opens the door.
will they refuse? Yeah,
It opens the door, Mike.
so there, it's still, the 5% for Hauraki District Council is denoted in 4C. It just removes that. Yeah,
Can I just ask Greg to comment on that?
Yeah, so the advice we've had so far from Hauraki District is it's seen as a relatively simple matter to confirm that contribution. It's not a significant contribution from Hauraki District. I guess the inclusion of 0.6 there was just to cover eventualities, so that if something did happen, then we were able to proceed without needing to have a
come
further
back
discussion.
for another
That's right.
decision.
Yeah, but as I said, we've had some very confident discussions with Hauraki around the process to confirm that contribution.
Well, if we're confident, then let's take it out. All right.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, because of the commitment I made to that community landowners, I just want to put an amendment, and I'll test whether there's any support, that item 3, that the repayment of expenditure associated with the canal assessed at 458 be paid for from general rate surplus and the interest element. So to prevent interest, and the matter be dealt with at a later time when the canal outcome is determined. Words to that effect.
And as noted, that is at odds with our current funding policy. So,
Appreciate
Yep,
that,
yep,
but we
yep,
can override
yep.
our own policy.
Yes,
So
we can.
I'd like to test it, perhaps pro forma or whatever. Thank you.
I'd support that amendment.
No, look, I won't support that amendment. And could I just note, with the greatest of respect, Noel, I'm a bit concerned that you're proposing this in light of the knowledge that it is contrary to our funding policy.
Can I get a show of hands? We're just going to do a straw poll on it, all right? Who is in support of that amendment? Can we, who's in support? 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you. All right, okay, we have a mover and a seconder for 1 through 5, removing number 6. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, with that, let's take a wee break, eh? 10 minutes.